The rifle crack echoed across the canyon 3 times before Elias Holt realized he'd just saved a man's life and sealed his own fate forever. What he didn't know was that the dying Apache elder pinned beneath that wolf would send him something far more dangerous than Gratitude, his daughter. A warrior woman cast out by her own people, carrying secrets that could destroy them both. This is their story. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey travels. The desert had a way of keeping secrets until it was ready to scream them. Elias Holt learned that truth on a Tuesday afternoon in September, when the Arizona sun hung like a brass plate in the sky and the air shimmered with heat that could make a man see things that weren't there. He'd been mending fence line on the eastern edge of his property, where the scrub brush grew thick and the land rolled away toward the Apache territories in waves of red rock and creosote. He was 42 years old, lean as drought-season cattle, with hands that knew rope and wood better than they'd ever known tenderness. 3 years had passed since Sarah died, bringing their stillborn son into the world, and in those 3 years Elias had spoken maybe 1,000 words total, most of them to his horse. The scream changed everything. It tore through the afternoon silence like cloth ripping raw, desperate, utterly human. It gathered itself and came again limping, but driven by something beyond pain, hunger, maybe, or madness. The second shot hit center mass. The wolf stumbled, coughed blood, and still its legs churned forward. The third shot ended it. The beast collapsed 6 feet from Elias's boots, its tongue lolling in the dust, eyes already glazing over. Elias's hands were shaking as he lowered the rifle. His heart hammered against his ribs so hard he thought they might crack. Behind him, the old Apache man made a sound, half groan, half laugh. "American, shoot straight," the man rasped in heavily accented English. "This is good." Elias dropped to his knees beside the elder. Up close, he could see this was a man who'd lived 7 decades, at least maybe 8. His face was a map of sun and survival, creased deep with lines that spoke of laughter and suffering in equal measure. Silver hair hung in 2 long braids. Around his neck hung a medicine bag worn smooth with age. The old man Nashota bit down on a piece of leather to keep from screaming as Elias shifted him onto the makeshift stretcher. By the time they started moving, Nashota had passed out, which was probably a mercy. The journey back to the ranch took 2 hours. The sun was sinking toward the horizon when Elias finally dragged the travois up to his cabin, a squat adobe structure with a covered porch and a roof that only leaked in 3 places. His horse, a patient bay mare named Belle, had followed behind the whole way without complaint. Inside, Elias laid the old man on his own bed, the only bed, and went to work. He'd learned field medicine the hard way, patching up ranch hands and himself over the years. He cleaned the wounds with whiskey that made Nashota wake with a gasp, splinted the broken leg with boards from his kindling pile, and stitched the throat wounds with thread meant for mending shirts. Through it all, the old man bore it with a stoic silence that Elias respected. Among my people, a life saved creates a bond, sacred, unbreakable. The debt will be paid. Before Elias could argue further, Nashota had begun the slow journey toward the smoke, using a staff Elias had fashioned for him. Elias watched until the old man disappeared into the heat shimmer, then turned Belle toward home. He thought that was the end of it. He was wrong. Ten days passed. The ranch settled back into its familiar rhythms: water, the cattle mend, the fence, fix the roof, leak, sleep, repeat. Elias told himself he'd done a good thing, and that was enough. He didn't need thanks or repayment. He certainly didn't need complications. Then, just after dawn on a Wednesday, he heard a horse approaching. Elias stepped onto his porch, coffee in hand, rifle leaning against the door frame within easy reach. "You didn't take chances out here," The territorial rangers said the Apache troubles were mostly settled, but mostly left a lot of room for arrows in your back. What he saw made him set down his coffee carefully. Nashoda sat astride a paint pony, his legs still splinted but his back straight as a lodgepole pine. Beside him rode a woman on a dark bay, and Elias felt something in his chest tighten at the sight of her. She was tall, easily 5'8" or 9, with the kind of presence that made you notice her before you noticed anything else. Battle scars, maybe, or something worse. "Thank you," he said quietly. She released his hand and stepped back, but for just a moment something in her expression softened. Not quite a smile, but something close. Some acknowledgement that they were two people trying to survive in a hard land, and maybe that was enough to warrant a small kindness. That night, she sat closer to the porch. Not on it, that would have been too much, but near enough that when Elias sat in his chair, watching the stars come out, he could see her profile in the darkness, and she could see his. They didn't speak, but the silence felt different now, less like a wall and more like a bridge they were both afraid to cross. The next morning, when he left her breakfast on the porch, he added an extra piece of bacon. The bowl came back empty, and beside it was a small bundle of desert sage, tied with grass, an Apache gesture of thanks. Elias smiled for the first time in 3 years. The sage bundle stayed on Elias's table for 3 days before he worked up the courage to acknowledge it. On the 4th morning, he placed it carefully in his shirt pocket before heading out to work, and when Sana saw it there, something in her shoulders relaxed just slightly. Small things. That's how trust was built out here. Not with grand gestures or pretty words, but with bacon and bandages and sage. With showing up every day and doing the work and not asking for more than the other person could give. The second week brought rain, not the violent monsoons that could turn dry washes into raging torrents in minutes, but steady soaking rain that lasted 3 days and turned the yard into red mud that sucked at your boots. The kind of rain that found every leak in every roof and reminded you that shelter was a negotiation, not a guarantee. On the first night, Elias watched from his window as Sana huddled under a waxed canvas tarp near the corral, rain drumming against the fabric. She'd built a small lean-to of sorts, but it was barely adequate. Water ran in rivulets around her makeshift shelter, and even from the cabin he could see her shivering. He lasted an hour before his conscience got the better of him. Opening the door, he called out into the rain, "Sana, come inside." No response, just the steady drum of rain and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. "You're going to catch your death out there," he tried again. "I've got a fire going and coffee on the stove." Still nothing. But he saw the canvas shift slightly, so he knew she'd heard him. "Look," he said softer now. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm just asking you to get out of the rain. You can sleep by the fire. I'll stay in my room. Door stays open if it makes you feel safer, but please come in before you freeze." The silence stretched so long he thought she'd refuse. Then the canvas moved aside and Sana emerged, soaked to the bone, her buckskin dress clinging to her frame, her braid dripping water. She looked smaller, somehow vulnerable, in a way she never did in daylight. She limped toward the cabin, that uneven gait more pronounced now, and climbed the porch steps slowly. At the doorway, she paused. "I am muddy," she said, her voice rough from cold. "Floor's already seen worse. Come on." She stepped inside, and Elias saw her take in the space with those quick, assessing eyes. It was a simple cabin, one main room with a fireplace, a kitchen area, a table and 2 chairs and 2 doorways leading to small bedrooms. Nothing fancy, but it was dry and warm and smelled of wood smoke and coffee. "There's a blanket on the chair," Elias said, gesturing. "Get yourself warm. I'll heat up some stew." She didn't move toward the chair. Instead, she stood dripping on his floor, her arms wrapped around herself, looking like she might bolt at any second. "Sana," he said gently, "it's all right. You're safe here." Something in her face cracked at those words. Not a lot, just a hairline fracture in that careful mask she wore. Her jaw tightened and her eyes went bright with something that might have been tears, or might have been fury, or might have been both. "Safe," she repeated, like the word was foreign. "I have not been safe since I was a child." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning Elias didn't fully understand, but could feel the weight of. He wanted to ask what had happened to her, what had put that haunted look in her eyes and that limp in her step. But he'd lived enough life to know that some stories had to be offered, not demanded. "Well," he said quietly, "you're safe here, for what that's worth." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for something, lies maybe, or ulterior motives. Whatever she found there, it must have satisfied her, because she finally moved toward the fire and took the blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders with shaking hands. Elias busied himself with the stew, giving her space to warm up and gather herself. He could feel her watching him as he worked, that constant vigilance that never quite turned off. When the stew was hot, he ladled out 2 bowls and set them on the table. "Eat," he said. "You'll feel better with something warm in you." They ate in silence, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the rain against the roof. But it was a different kind of silence now, something less guarded. When they finished, Sana helped him clean the bowls without being asked, and when he showed her the spare room, barely big enough for a bed and a chest of drawers, but dry and warm, she actually nodded her thanks. "The door doesn't lock," Elias said. "But like I said, mine stays open. You need anything, you holler." "Why?" The word came out sharp, almost accusatory. "Why do you do this, show kindness to someone you do not know?" Elias leaned against the doorframe, considering. "My wife used to say that kindness doesn't need a reason. It just needs an opportunity. I reckon she was right about that." "Your wife? She is dead. 3 years now, her and our son both." Sana's expression softened slightly. "I am sorry for your loss. And I'm sorry for whatever put that look in your eyes," he said quietly. "Now get some sleep. Morning comes early." He left her there and retreated to his own room, leaving the door open as promised. He lay in bed, listening to the rain and the small sounds of Sana settling into the spare room, the creak of the bed frame, the rustle of blankets. Eventually he heard her breathing, even out into sleep. It was the first time in 3 years that another person had slept under his roof. It felt strange, but not bad. The rain continued through the next day and into the night. Sana stayed inside, helping with indoor chores, mending harnesses, organizing supplies, cooking meals that were better than anything Elias had managed in years. She moved through his space with careful respect, never touching anything without asking, always maintaining that careful distance. But on the second night, something shifted. They were sitting at the table after dinner, Elias cleaning his rifle, and Sana mending a torn shirt, when she spoke suddenly into the quiet. "My father told you I carry wounds not of the body." Elias looked up. She was staring at the shirt in her hands, her needle poised but still. "He did," Elias said carefully. "Did he tell you what kind of wounds?" "No, and I didn't ask." She nodded slowly. "That is unusual. Most people want to know. Want to hear the story so they can judge whether the wounds were earned or deserved. I figure all wounds hurt the same, regardless of how they were gotten." Her hands stilled completely. For a moment she didn't breathe. Then she set down the shirt and looked at him directly, and there was something raw and terrible in her eyes. "I was cast out," she said, "from my tribe, from my family, from everything I knew." Elias set down the rifle, giving her his full attention. "I was a warrior," she continued, her voice steady but strained. "Trained by my father, by the best fighters in our band. I could ride before I could walk properly. I could shoot a bow before I could shoot a rifle. I was good. I was respected." She paused, her jaw working like she was chewing something bitter. 3 summers ago, raiders came, not Apache. Comancheros, Mexican and American mixed traders in flesh and guns, and anything else that could be sold. They attacked during a hunt when most of our warriors were away. They took women. They took me. Elias felt something cold settle in his stomach. I was with them for 2 months. Sana said, her voice flat, now distant. They did what such men do. When I finally escaped, when I finally made it back to my people, I thought I was going home. I thought I was safe. Her laugh was bitter as alkali water. But I was tainted, ruined. The elders said my medicine was broken, that I had been touched by evil and could not be cleansed. The other women feared me. The warriors would not look at me. My own mother would not speak my name. She met Elias's eyes, and in hers he saw a pain so deep it seemed bottomless. They cast me out, said I was no longer Apache, no longer their daughter. I was told to leave and never return, that if I came back I would be killed, as a warning to others who allowed themselves to be taken. Jesus, Elias breathed. My father, he was away when this happened. When he returned and learned what the elders had done, he was furious. But the decision was made. He could not reverse it without dividing the tribe. So he took me to a place between our lands and the American settlements. He built me a small shelter. He brought me food when he could, but I was alone, always alone. She picked up the shirt again, her fingers trembling slightly as she resumed her stitching. When you saved his life, when you showed him kindness without asking for anything in return, he saw a chance, a way to give me something I had not had in 3 years, a purpose, a place, even if only temporary, even if with a stranger. Elias sat back in his chair, processing what she'd told him. The anger rose in him slowly, a building heat in his chest. Anger at the raiders who'd taken her, anger at the tribe that had blamed her for what had been done to her, anger at a world that could be so goddamn cruel to people who didn't deserve it. They were wrong, he said finally, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. Your elders, they were wrong. What happened to you that wasn't your fault? That wasn't your medicine breaking. That was evil being done to you, and you survived it. That takes more strength than most people have in their whole bodies. Sana's hands stopped moving. She stared at him like he'd spoken in a language she didn't know. You do not think I am tainted. I think you're a woman who survived hell and came out the other side still standing. That's not tainted, that's strong. A sound escaped her, then something between a sob and a gasp. She pressed her hand to her mouth, her shoulders shaking. No one has said such words to me, she managed. Not in 3 years. Everyone who knows, they look at me with pity or disgust or fear. But you look at me like I am still a person. You are a person, Elias said firmly. What was done to you doesn't change that. And anyone who says different is a fool and a coward. She wiped her eyes, roughly embarrassed by the tears. This is why my father brought me here. He hoped you might see me as he does, as I was not as I am now. I see you as you are now, Elias corrected gently. A woman who works hard, who knows horses and land, who sleeps in the rain rather than accept help because she's been taught not to trust kindness. I see someone who's survived and is still surviving. That's who you are now, and that's someone worth knowing. The silence that followed was thick with things unsaid. Outside, the rain began to ease, the steady drum fading to a gentle patter. Inside, something had fundamentally changed between them. A wall had come down, not completely walls that thick took time to dismantle, but enough to let light through. Thank you, Sana said finally, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. For listening, for not looking away. No need to thank me for basic decency. She smiled, then a real smile, small but genuine. It transformed her face, softening those hard angles into something almost beautiful. You are a strange American, Elias Holt. Yeah, well, you're a strange Apache Sana. I don't know your full name. Just Sana. I have no family name now. The exiled do not carry their family's name. Then just Sana it is. That night she slept in the spare room again, but when Elias woke in the small hours, restless and unable to settle, he found her sitting by the dying fire, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the embers. "Can't sleep?" he asked, moving to add wood to the fire. "I keep thinking I will wake up and this will be gone. That kindness is a dream, and I will wake to find myself alone again." Elias settled into the other chair. "It's not a dream, and you're not alone, not anymore." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You say this now, but when others know, when they know what I am, what was done to me, they will tell you to send me away. They will say I am bad luck, cursed. Let them say it. This is my land, my home, and I decide who's welcome here. You do not know what you are offering. Maybe not, but I know what I'm not offering: judgment for things that weren't your fault." They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire rebuild itself. Finally, Sana spoke again, softer now. "The leg, you have noticed. Hard not to. One of the Comancheros broke it when I tried to escape the first time. It did not heal straight. It aches when the weather changes, and I cannot run as I once did. Does it hurt now? Always, but I am used to it. Sarah, my wife, she had a remedy for aches, willow bark tea with honey. I could make you some. You would do this? Sana, I'm going to keep doing these things, basic kindness, basic decency, until you stop being surprised by them. Might take a while, but I'm a patient man." She laughed, a real laugh this time, and the sound of it filled the cabin with something that had been missing for 3 years. Life, hope, the possibility that broken things could still work, even if they didn't work quite the same way they had before. By the time the sun rose, the rain had stopped. The world outside was washed clean, the desert smelling of creosote and wet earth. When Elias stepped onto the porch with his morning coffee, Sana was already up, tending to the horses. But when she saw him, she didn't turn away. She raised her hand in greeting, and he raised his cup in return. Small gestures, small kindnesses. But they were building something brick by brick, moment by moment. Something that might, if they were lucky and careful, become something worth protecting. The days that followed found a new rhythm. Sana still worked from dawn to dusk, but now she worked alongside Elias instead of apart from him. They talked as they mended fence, shared observations about the cattle and the weather, told stories about their lives before. Elias learned that Sana had a sharp sense of humor, buried beneath that serious exterior, that she could identify dozens of plants and their uses, that she missed the sound of her mother's singing, even though her mother had rejected her. Sana learned that Elias had built this ranch from nothing, that he'd loved his wife with a quiet devotion that still showed in how carefully he maintained her garden, that he read books in the evening, poetry mostly, which surprised her. "You do not seem like a man who reads poetry," she said one night, finding him with a worn volume of Whitman. "Sarah loved it, used to read to me while I worked. After she died, I kept reading, felt like keeping her voice alive somehow." Sana sat down across from him. "Read to me. You sure? I would like to hear what your wife loved." So Elias read, his rough voice softening around the words, and Sana listened with her eyes closed, and for a little while the cabin held 3 souls, instead of 2 living, and one remembered all of them, finding a kind of peace. But peace in the territory was always temporary. On a bright morning 2 weeks after the rain, when the desert had dried back to its normal state and the work had settled into comfortable routine, Elias spotted dust on the horizon, a lot of dust, too much for just 1 or 2 riders. "Sana," he called. She was in the corral, working with one of the horses. "We've got company coming." She turned the saw where he was looking and went very still. Her hand moved instinctively to the knife at her belt. "How many?" she asked. "Can't tell yet, but enough to kick up that much dust. I'd say at least 5 or 6. They stood watching as the dust cloud resolved itself into riders. 6 of them, all Apache, all armed. As they got closer, Elias could see they were warriors, young men, fit and dangerous, their faces painted for something. Not war exactly, but not peace either. "Do you know them?" Elias asked quietly. Sana's face had gone rigid, all the softness of the past weeks vanished. Yes, the one in front, that is Dakota. He wanted to marry me before you were taken. Yes. The warriors rode into the yard and formed a rough semicircle, their horses stamping and blowing. Dakota dismounted with fluid grace. He was tall, probably Elias's age, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having lost a fight. His eyes swept over Sana with something that might have been longing or might have been contempt. It was hard to tell. Then he looked at Elias, and there was no mistaking that expression, pure dislike. "You are the American who saved Nashota's life," Dakota said in English only slightly accented. His voice was cold. "I am. Name's Elias Holt. I am Dakota warrior of the Chiricahua. I have come for Sana." Elias felt Sana stiffen beside him. "Come for her, how? The debt has been paid. Nashota sent word. It is time for her to return." "Interesting," Elias said slowly, "because last I checked, Sana was cast out, told never to return. So which is it? Is she Apache or isn't she?" Dakota's jaw tightened. "The elders have reconsidered. Her service to you has restored some honor. She may return to the tribe. She will work in my mother's home. She will be allowed to live among us again." "Allowed," Sana said, her voice dripping with bitterness. "How generous." "You should be grateful," Dakota snapped. "You were nothing, dead to us. Now you have a chance to rebuild your life among your people." "My people," Sana repeated. "My people cast me out like a diseased dog. My people said I was cursed, tainted, evil. And now, because I worked for an American, suddenly I am worthy of living among you again. The elders have decided. The elders can go to hell," Sana said, her voice shaking with fury, "along with you and everyone else who turned their backs on me when I needed them most." Dakota's face darkened. "You dare!" "She dares," Elias interrupted, stepping forward slightly. "And she's got every right to. You folks threw her away. Now you want her back because it suits you somehow. That's not how it works. This is not your concern, American. It's absolutely my concern. Sana lives here, works here, and unless I'm very much mistaken, she gets to decide whether she stays or goes. Not you, not your elders, her." The other warriors shifted on their horses' hands, moving toward weapons. The air went tight with tension. Dakota stared at Elias for a long moment. "You do not understand our ways." "I understand throwing people away when they're inconvenient and wanting them back when it suits you. That's not culture, that's cruelty." "Careful, American. You are one man, we are 6, and there are more where we came from." "That a threat, a fact." Sana stepped forward, then placing herself between Elias and the warriors. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong. "I will not return. The debt my father believed he owed has been paid, yes. But I do not serve the tribe anymore. I was cast out. I accepted this. I rebuilt my life. And now I choose where I stay. I choose to stay here." Dakota's expression cycled through shock, anger, and something that might have been hurt. "Sana, please. I have argued for your return. I have convinced the elders to reconsider. I still care for you. Come home." For just a moment, Sana's mask cracked. Elias saw the pain there, the longing for what had been lost. But then she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. "If you cared for me, you would have fought for me 3 years ago. You would have stood against the elders then. You did not. You stood silent while they destroyed me. Now you want me back, but not because you love me. Because your pride is wounded that I might prefer living with an American to living with you. That is not, it is exactly that. I know you, Dakota. I know your pride, and I will not come back just to soothe it." The warrior's face went hard as stone. "If you stay here, you will be named traitor. You will never be welcome among our people again, not in this life or the next." "Then I am already dead to you," Sana said quietly. As I have been for 3 years. Nothing has changed, except you now want something from me. But I have nothing to give you, not anymore. Dakota looked at Elias. You have poisoned her mind against us. I've done nothing but treat her with basic human decency. If that's poison to you, that says more about you than me. For a moment, Elias thought it would come to violence. He could see Dakota calculating, weighing his pride against the consequences of starting a fight. The other warriors watched their leader waiting for a signal. Then Dakota spat in the dust at Sana's feet. You were always weak, he said. We should have let the Comancheros keep you. The words hit like a physical blow. Sana flinched and Elias felt rage bloom hot and sudden in his chest. Before he could think better of it, he'd stepped forward and driven his fist into Dakota's face. The warrior went down hard, blood streaming from his nose. The other 5 warriors went for their weapons, and suddenly Elias was staring down 6 rifles and knowing he'd just made a potentially fatal mistake. But he didn't back down. Get off my land, he said, his voice deadly calm, and don't come back, any of you. This woman is under my protection. You want to hurt her, you go through me first, and I promise you I'll make it costly. Dakota climbed to his feet, wiping blood from his face. His eyes promised vengeance. You have made a powerful enemy today, American. Add it to the list. The warriors mounted up Dakota last. Before they rode away, he looked at Sana one final time. You will regret this choice, he said. Both of you. Then they were gone, thundering away in a cloud of dust and fury. The silence after the warriors left felt heavier than the dust they'd kicked up. Elias stood in his yard, his knuckles throbbing from where they'd connected with Dakota's face, watching the horizon long after the riders had disappeared. Beside him, Sana stood rigid as a fence post, her breathing shallow and quick. You should not have done that, she said finally, her voice tight. Probably not. They will come back, with more warriors. They will let them come. Elias turned to look at her. I meant what I said. You're under my protection now. That means something. It means you have made yourself a target, for me, a woman you barely know. I know enough. I know you didn't deserve what he said. I know you've been hurt enough without having to stand there and take more of it. He flexed his hand, feeling the bones shift. And I know I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Something in Sana's face crumbled. She pressed both hands to her mouth, her eyes squeezed shut, and for a moment Elias thought she might break down completely, but she held it together the way he suspected she'd been holding it together for 3 years, through sheer force of will. No one has ever fought for me, she whispered. Not once, not ever. Well, now someone has. Get used to it. She opened her eyes and looked at him, and there was something in that look that made his chest tighten. Gratitude, yes, but also fear. Fear of hope, maybe. Fear of believing that this could be real. Come on, Elias said, gentler now. Let's get inside. We need to prepare. For what? For them coming back. Because you're right, they will. Dakota's pride won't let him leave it like this. So we prepare. We make sure we're ready. They spent the afternoon turning the ranch into something that could be defended. Elias cleaned and loaded every gun he owned, 2 rifles, a shotgun, and his old army revolver. He moved ammunition to strategic locations around the cabin and barn. He checked sight lines and angles, thinking like the soldier he'd been 20 years ago during the brief but brutal campaign against the Comanche. Sana worked alongside him, her movements efficient and sure. She knew defense, knew how to read terrain and anticipate attack routes. Together they identified the weak points in the ranch's layout and did what they could to shore them up. You were a soldier, she observed, watching him work. Long time ago, different war. But you remember. Some things you don't forget, like how to stay alive when people want you dead. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, they finished their preparations. The ranch was as ready as it could be. Now there was nothing to do but wait. They ate dinner in near silence, both of them keyed up and listening for sounds that didn't belong. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind made them tense. The night stretched out long and anxious. Around 10 o'clock, Sana spoke into the quiet. "Tell me about your wife." Elias looked up from the gun he was cleaning for the third time soon. "Sarah, what do you want to know? What she was like, how you met, why you loved her." Sana was sitting by the fire, her knife in her hands, running a whetstone along the blade in steady, rhythmic strokes. "I would like to think about something other than tomorrow." Elias set down the rifle and leaned back in his chair. "Met her in Kansas. I was working on a ranch there, and she was the owner's daughter. Pretty as a spring morning, smart as a whip, and stubborn enough to make a mule look reasonable." "She sounds formidable." "She was. Her daddy didn't want her marrying some broke ranch hand with no prospects, but Sarah didn't care. She told him she was going to marry me whether he blessed it or not, and that he could either be part of our lives or not. His choice." Elias smiled at the memory. He came around eventually. Hard to say no to Sarah once she'd made up her mind. "What brought you here to the territory?" "Dreams mostly. Sarah wanted space to build something of our own, and I wanted to give her that. So we saved every penny for 5 years, bought this land site unseen, and headed west." His smile faded. "She loved it here. Loved the sky, the space, the way you could see weather coming from 50 miles away. She was happy. And then she got pregnant and we were happier. Started making plans, building a crib, choosing names. Everything seemed perfect." His throat tightened. "But the birth went wrong. Baby was breech. The midwife tried, but there was nothing to be done. Lost them both in the same hour." Sana stopped sharpening her knife. "I am sorry. That is a terrible thing." "Yeah, it was." Elias rubbed his face. "For a long time after I thought about leaving, selling this place and going somewhere that didn't have her memory in every corner. But then I realized that was exactly why I needed to stay, because she loved it here, because we built this together. Leaving would be like losing her twice." "So you stayed, alone. Alone seemed safer than trying again. Couldn't lose what I didn't have. And now I'm not so alone anymore, and I'm starting to think maybe that's not such a bad thing." Their eyes met across the room. In the firelight, Sana looked younger somehow, less guarded. The knife lay still in her hands. "I have never been in love," she said quietly. "Dakota wanted to marry me, but that was about alliance and family connections. I respected him, but I did not love him. And after what happened after the Comancheros, I thought I would never want anyone to touch me again. That part of me was dead. But when you wrapped my hand that day, when you looked at me like I was still a person worth seeing, I felt something I thought was gone forever. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it, the hope that maybe I was not as broken as I believed." Elias stood and moved to sit in the chair closer to her. "You're not broken, Sana. You're wounded. There's a difference. Broken things can't be fixed. Wounded things heal, might leave scars, might not work quite the same way as before, but they heal." "Do you truly believe that?" "I'm starting to. Hadn't before you showed up, but now I'm thinking maybe we're both wounded things trying to figure out how to heal, and maybe we heal better together than we ever could alone." Sana reached out and took his hand, her rough fingers intertwining with his. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just holding on in the firelight while the night deepened around them. But the peace couldn't last. Around midnight, bells started acting strange, stamping and snorting in the corral. Elias was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. "They're here," Sana whispered. "Not necessarily. Could be a coyote, could be—" The shot shattered the window above the fireplace, sending glass everywhere. Elias dove for cover, pulling Sana down with him. 2 more shots followed, punching through the wooden door. "Definitely them," Elias muttered. "Stay low." He crawled to the window and risked a quick look. In the moonlight, he could see figures moving through the yard, 4, maybe 5 of them. They were using the outbuildings for cover, advancing slowly. "Elias Holt," Dakota's voice carried across the yard. "Send out the woman and we leave you in peace." "Not happening," Elias shouted back. "Then you die with her. Your choice, American." Another volley of shots peppered the cabin. Elias returned fire, more to keep them honest than with any hope of hitting anything in the dark. Beside him, Sana had retrieved a rifle and was positioned at the other window. "How many?" she asked. "5, I think. Dakota and 4 others. The 2 who stayed behind are circling to the back. They will try to come through the barn." "How do you know?" "Because that is what I would do." She shifted position slightly. "I will go. Stop them before they can get close." "The hell you will. You go out there, you're as likely to get shot as they are. I know their tactics. I know how they move. You do not." Her eyes were hard, determined. "I can stop them. Trust me." Everything in Elias wanted to say no, to keep her here where he could protect her. But looking at her face, he realized she didn't need his protection. She needed his trust. "Be careful," he said. "Always am." She slipped out the back door like smoke, disappearing into the darkness so completely it was like she'd never been there. Elias forced himself to focus on the front where Dakota and his warriors were still advancing. He fired twice more and was rewarded with a curse in Apache. At least one shot had come close. The warriors retreated slightly, regrouping. "You cannot hold out forever," Dakota called. "We have all night. We have more ammunition. You will run out and die tired." "I've got enough bullets for all of you," Elias shouted back. "Question is which one of you wants to be first?" From somewhere behind the barn, he heard a shout, then silence. His heart seized. Sana. But he couldn't abandon his position to check on her. He had to trust she could handle herself. More shots came from the front. These were more focused, more accurate. They were getting his range. One bullet came close enough that he felt the air displacement as it passed his ear. Then he heard Dakota's voice again, closer now. "Your woman is dead, American. I killed her myself. Now you die alone." "He's lying," Elias muttered to himself. "He's trying to draw you out. Don't be stupid." But the fear was there, cold and insistent. What if Dakota was telling the truth? What if Sana was lying out there bleeding? What if he'd sent her to her death by trusting her to handle 2 warriors alone? The next voice he heard almost made him cry with relief. "I am not dead, Dakota." Sana's voice rang out from somewhere near the corral. "But your friends are. They should have watched their backs better." A string of curses in Apache, then silence. Elias could imagine Dakota's rage, knowing that Sana had taken out 2 of his warriors. "She was always the better fighter," Dakota called, and now his voice had moved. He was circling, trying to find a better angle. "But she is 1 and we are 3. The math does not favor you." Movement caught Elias's eye. One of the warriors was making a break for the barn, using the darkness as cover. Elias tracked him, led him just slightly, and fired. The warrior went down hard and didn't get up. 2 now, Elias called. "Still feel good about those odds?" The answer came in the form of a torch arcing through the air toward the barn. It landed in the hay outside the door and caught immediately. Within seconds, flames were climbing the dry wood. "No!" Elias's heart dropped. The barn held his winter hay, his tools, everything he needed to survive the coming season. If it burned, he was ruined. But the barn also had another problem. His extra ammunition was stored there. "Sana," he shouted, "get away from the barn. There's ammunition inside." He saw her silhouette break from cover and run toward the house. At the same moment, Dakota and his remaining warrior broke cover too, charging while Elias was distracted by the fire. Elias spun and fired, missed, fired again. The second warrior stumbled but kept coming. Elias worked the bolt action, ejected the spent cartridge, loaded another, and fired a third time. The warrior went down. That left Dakota. The warrior chief hit the porch at full speed, shoulder-checking the damaged door and bursting through. Elias tried to bring the rifle around, but Dakota was too close too fast. He batted the weapon aside and they crashed into the table wood, splintering beneath them. They rolled both, fighting for advantage. Dakota was younger, faster, and fighting mad. He got on top and his hands found Elias's throat, squeezing with terrifying strength. Elias bucked and twisted, trying to throw him off, but the warrior held on like a burr. Black spots started dancing in Elias's vision. His lungs screamed for air. This was it. This was how it ended. Then Sana was there. She didn't hesitate, didn't call out a warning. She simply drove her knife into the meat of Dakota's shoulder with all her strength. The warrior screamed and released Elias, spinning to face this new threat. Blood poured from the wound, but it hadn't hit anything vital. He grabbed Sana's wrist before she could strike again and twisted hard. Her knife clattered to the floor. "Traitor!" Dakota hissed, his face inches from hers. "You were always a traitor, even before the Comancheros, always looking at the white man's world like it was better than your own." "It was better," Sana spat back, "because it didn't throw me away for being hurt, because one white man showed me more kindness in 2 weeks than my entire tribe showed me in 2 decades. Then die with him." Dakota's good hand went for the knife at his belt, but he never reached it. Elias, finally able to breathe again, grabbed the fireplace poker and swung it with every ounce of strength he had left. The iron bar caught Dakota across the temple with a sound like a hammer hitting meat. The warrior's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed, blood seeping from the gash in his head. For a moment, no one moved. Elias and Sana stood there, both breathing hard, staring at the unconscious man on the floor. Outside, the barn burned, casting dancing shadows through the broken windows. "Is he dead?" Sana whispered. Elias checked for a pulse. "No, but he'll have one hell of a headache when he wakes up. We should kill him. He will only come back." "Maybe, but I'm not a murderer, and I won't make you one either." Elias stood slowly, his entire body aching. "We'll tie him up, tend that shoulder wound, so he doesn't bleed out, and when he wakes up, we'll give him a choice. Leave and never come back, or I take him to the territorial marshal and press charges for arson and attempted murder. He will not go to your law. He will die first. Then that's his choice to make." They worked together to bind Dakota's hands and feet. Then Elias used whiskey and thread to close the knife wound in his shoulder. The warrior groaned but didn't wake. When it was done, they stepped outside to assess the damage. The barn was a total loss. The fire had spread to the roof, and there was no stopping it now. They could only watch as years of work burned away into the night sky. When the ammunition started cooking off, they retreated to a safe distance and watched the fireworks. "I am sorry," Sana said quietly. "This is my fault. If I had not stayed, don't." Elias cut her off. "This isn't your fault. This is on them, on their pride and their cruelty and their inability to let someone choose their own path. But your barn is wood and nails, can be rebuilt. You can't be." He turned to look at her. "You asked me earlier if I thought you were worth all this. The answer is yes. You're worth the barn. You're worth the trouble. You're worth whatever comes next." Sana's eyes shone with tears in the firelight. "I do not understand you. I do not understand this goodness in you. Where does it come from?" "Same place your strength comes from. I reckon from deciding that even when the world is cruel, you don't have to be. From choosing to be better than what's been done to you." They stood side by side and watched the barn burn down to embers. By the time dawn broke, there was nothing left but scorched earth and twisted metal. The bodies of the 3 warriors lay where they'd fallen. Dakota remained unconscious in the cabin, bound and guarded. As the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, a single rider appeared on the horizon. For a moment, Elias tensed, reaching for his rifle, but Sana touched his arm. "It is my father," she said. Nashota rode slowly into the yard, taking in the destruction with ancient, weary eyes. He dismounted with obvious pain, his leg still healing, and approached them. "I heard the guns," he said. I came as fast as I could. His eyes found Sana. Are you hurt, daughter? I am well, father, and Dakota, alive, inside, but he tried to kill us. He burned the barn. He and his warriors came to take me by force. Nashota's face hardened. This was not supposed to happen. I sent word that the debt was paid, that you were free to choose. The elders agreed. Dakota was told to invite you back, not to force you. He does not accept my choice to stay, Sana said, because his pride is greater than his sense. Nashota sighed suddenly, looking every one of his 70-odd years. I am sorry. I hoped that giving you a place here would heal some of what was broken. I did not mean to bring war to your door. You didn't bring war, Elias said. Dakota did, and he'll answer for it. What will you do with him? Wake him up and give him a choice. Leave and never come back or face American law. Nashota nodded slowly. He will leave. His pride will demand it. But understand this, Elias Holt, by defeating him, by humiliating him, you have made an enemy for life. He will not forget, and someday when you least expect it, he may return. Let him. Next time I'll be ready. And next time I will not be here to stop him. Next time he may bring more warriors than you can handle alone. The old man looked between them. You should leave this place. Go somewhere safe, somewhere he cannot find you. No. Sana's voice was firm. I have run enough. I have been cast out, discarded, driven away. I will not run again. This is my home now. If I must defend it, I will. Nashota studied his daughter for a long moment. You have changed. There is steel in you now that was not there before. Good, you will need it. He turned to Elias. And you? You are either very brave or very foolish. I cannot decide which. Little of both, probably. Sarah would have liked you, Nashota said, and it took Elias a moment to realize the old man had said, Sarah, not Sana. Your wife, the one you loved. She would have approved of what you do here, of how you treat my daughter. How do you know my wife's name? I asked around, found people who knew you, wanted to know what kind of man I was sending my daughter to. Nashota smiled slightly. They all said the same thing. Hard worker, fair dealer, loved his wife with everything he had, but sad. So very sad. Like a man who had died but forgotten to stop breathing. That's about right. You are not so sad anymore, I think. Elias looked at Sana, who stood watching the sunrise with her arms wrapped around herself. No, not so sad anymore. They woke Dakota an hour later. The warrior came around slowly, his eyes unfocused, one side of his face swollen and discolored. When he saw them standing around him, Elias, Sana, and Nashota, his expression cycled through confusion, rage, and finally bitter resignation. Kill me, he said. It is better than this shame. No one's killing anyone, Elias said. You've got a choice. You leave right now, ride away, and swear never to come back. Or I take you to Fort Huachuca and turn you over to the territorial marshal, your choice. Dakota's laugh was harsh. Your American law means nothing to me. Then you'll enjoy your stay in an American jail. They've got nice, thick walls. Probably won't see daylight for 5, maybe 10 years. The warrior's eyes went to Sana. You would let them do this, let them cage me like an animal. You came to kill us, she said flatly. You burned his barn, you murdered his peace. What did you think would happen, that we would thank you? I came for you. You came for your pride. I was just the excuse. She knelt down so they were eye to eye. I told you I would not return. I told you I chose to stay, but you could not accept that a woman might have her own mind, might make her own choice. So you tried to take the choice away. And now you are here beaten and bound, and you still cannot see that I am not yours to take. You were promised to me. Before I was taken, before I was ruined. That promise died 3 years ago, and you know it. You just cannot admit it. Dakota looked away, his jaw working. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. What happened to you was not your fault. I know this. I have always known this. Then why did you not speak for me? Why did you stand silent when the elders cast me out? Because, he struggled with the words, because I was afraid. Afraid of what others would say. Afraid that if I defended you, I would lose my standing, lose my place. I chose my pride over you, and I have lived with that shame every day since. And yet you learned nothing from it, because here you are choosing pride again. I wanted to make it right, to bring you home, to restore what was taken. What was taken cannot be restored, Dakota. The life I had is gone. The woman I was is gone. I am someone different now, and I choose a different path. Nashoda spoke, then his voice heavy with authority. Dakota, son of Daklugie, you have brought shame to our people with this action. You were sent to invite, not to force. You were told to respect her choice. Instead, you chose violence and paid the price. I strip you of your rank. You are no longer war leader. When you return, you will tell the elders what happened here. You will tell them that my daughter has chosen her path, and that path does not lead back to us, and you will accept this. You cannot. I can and I do. I am still elder. My word still carries weight, and my word is this: leave her alone. Let her build a life in peace. She has earned it. They cut Dakota loose and gave him his horse. He sat in the saddle looking down at them, and for a moment, Elias thought he might try something stupid, but the fight had gone out of him. There was only hollow defeat in his eyes now. You will regret this, he said to Sana, living among them, being neither Apache nor American, belonging nowhere. I already belong nowhere, Sana replied. But here, at least I am wanted. Dakota rode away without another word, heading east toward the mountains. They watched until he disappeared into the heat shimmer, and even then, they watched a little longer, making sure he was truly gone. He will not return, Nashoda said with certainty. His pride is too wounded now. He will tell the elders some story that preserves his honor, and they will believe it because it is easier than admitting one of their own was wrong. You will not be troubled by him again. And the tribe, Elias asked, will they leave us in peace? As long as I live, yes. I still have some influence. After I am gone, he shrugged. Who can say, but for now you have time. Use it well. Nashoda embraced his daughter, holding her tight. You have found something here, something precious. Do not waste it. I will not, father. And you, he said to Elias, take care of her. She is stronger than she knows, but still fragile in ways she does not show. Be patient, be kind, be worthy of the gift she is giving you. I'll do my best. That is all any of us can do. The old man rode away, leaving them standing in the ruins of the barn, the morning sun climbing higher in a cloudless sky. Around them the desert was coming alive, birds, singing insects, buzzing the world, continuing on despite the violence of the night before. Elias looked at the scorched ground where his barn had stood, going to need to rebuild. Yes. Going to take time. Yes. Going to need help. Sana smiled, that small, genuine smile that transformed her face. Good thing you have help then. He smiled back. Good thing. They buried the 3 dead warriors on a hill overlooking the ranch, marking each grave with a stone cairn. It seemed the right thing to do, regardless of what they'd come here to accomplish. They were still men, still someone's sons, maybe someone's brothers. They deserved that much respect. When it was done, they stood looking out over the land, the burned barn, the house with its shattered windows, the corral where the horses grazed peacefully, as if nothing had happened. It does not look like much, Sana said. No, but it's ours, and we'll make it into something worth having. Together, together. She took his hand, and they stood there on that hill as the day grew hot around them, 2 wounded people beginning the long process of healing. The road ahead would be hard. There would be more challenges, more people who couldn't accept what they were building. But for now, in this moment, they had each other and a piece of land and the stubborn determination to make it work. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. The work of rebuilding began the next morning. Elias woke before dawn as he always did, but this time when he walked out onto the porch, he wasn't alone. Sana was already up, standing in the yard, staring at the blackened footprint where the barn had been. She had her arms wrapped around herself, and in the pre-dawn light she looked small and uncertain in a way she never did during daylight hours. "Couldn't sleep?" Elias asked, moving to stand beside her. "I keep thinking about what Dakota said, about belonging nowhere, about being neither Apache nor American." She turned to look at him. What if he is right? What if I am simply fooling myself that this can work? Do you feel like you're fooling yourself? She considered this. No. When I am with you, when I am working this land, I feel more myself than I have in years. But that does not mean others will accept it. Your people will see an Apache woman. My people will see a traitor. Where does that leave us? Right here, Elias said simply, on our land, building our life. What others think, that's their problem, not ours. Is it truly that simple for you? Nothing's simple, but some things are worth the complication. He gestured to the burned barn. That right there, that's complicated, but we're going to rebuild it anyway because we need it. And people talking about us, that's complicated too, but we're going to live our lives anyway because we need that even more. Sana smiled slightly. You make it sound easy. Didn't say it was easy, said it was worth it. Big difference. They stood in comfortable silence as the sun began to paint the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold. Around them, the desert was waking up mourning doves, calling a roadrunner, skittering through the brush, the horses nickering softly in the corral. Where do we start? Sana asked. With breakfast. Can't rebuild on an empty stomach. They ate together at the scarred table, making plans between bites of eggs and cornbread. They'd need lumber, nails, roofing materials. They'd need to ride into town, which meant facing people. Meant making their arrangement public in a way it hadn't been before. They will talk, Sana said, reading his thoughts. The townspeople. They will say things. Let them talk. Long as they sell us lumber, I don't care what they say. But he did care, and they both knew it. Not for himself, he'd weathered enough gossip after Sarah died to know how little it mattered in the end. But for Sana, who'd already endured so much judgment, so much rejection. The thought of her facing more of it made his chest tight with protective anger. I have an idea, he said suddenly. Before we go to town, before we face any of that, let's go somewhere just for the day, somewhere away from all this. Where? There's a canyon about 5 miles north. Creek runs through it year-round, cottonwoods grow thick, and it's about the prettiest spot in the territory. Sarah and I used to go there when we needed to remember why we'd come west in the first place. He paused. I haven't been back since she died, been avoiding it, truth be told, but maybe it's time, and maybe I'd like to show it to you. Something soft crossed Sana's face. You would share that place with me, a place that was hers. I think she'd want me to. She never liked the idea of beautiful things going to waste just because she couldn't see them anymore. They packed a simple lunch and saddled the horses. The ride north took them through desert that gradually gave way to higher ground, where juniper and pinon grew, scattered across rolling hills. The air was cooler here, scented with pine and sage. Elias found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't even known he was tense. Beside him, Sana rode with easy grace, her body moving with the horse like they were one creature. She'd tied her hair back with a strip of leather, and the morning sun caught the blue-black highlights in it. She looked free out here, unburdened in a way she never did at the ranch. Tell me something, she said as they rode. Something you have never told anyone else. Elias thought about it. All right. Sometimes late at night I talk to Sarah, tell her about my day, ask her advice on things. I know she's not really there, no, it's just me talking to empty air, but it helps, makes me feel less alone. That is not strange. That is beautiful. Your turn, tell me something. Sana was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer, then softly, sometimes I am glad it happened. Not the rape itself, I would not wish that on anyone, but being cast out. Because if I had not been cast out, I would still be there. I would have married Dakota, borne his children, lived the life that was expected of me, and I would never have known that I could be something different, that I could choose my own path. She looked at him. Does that make me a terrible person? No, makes you human, finding meaning in suffering. That's not terrible. That's survival. The canyon, when they reached it, was every bit as beautiful as Elias remembered. Water sparkled over smooth rocks. Cottonwoods provided dappled shade, and the walls rose on either side in layers of red and gold stone. It was a hidden place, a secret pocket of green in the desert brown. They dismounted and let the horses drink while they spread a blanket in the shade. For a while they just sat listening to the water and the wind in the leaves. The peace of it sank into Elias's bones, easing aches he hadn't even known he carried. Sarah was right, Sana said. This is a place worth remembering. Yeah, she had good taste in just about everything, except men, apparently, since she chose me. I think her taste was excellent. Sana's voice was warm, almost teasing. She chose a man who keeps his promises, who fights for what is right, who makes very good cornbread. The cornbread is what won you over, huh? Among other things. They ate their lunch slowly, talking about small things, the best way to train a horse, whether winter would come early this year, the merits of adobe versus wood construction. Easy conversation that asked nothing and gave everything. When they finished eating, Sana lay back on the blanket and closed her eyes, her face turned toward the sun filtering through the leaves. I could stay here forever, she murmured. We'd starve in about 3 days, but it's a nice thought. She laughed, that rare, genuine laugh that made Elias's heart do strange things in his chest. Always practical. Someone has to be. But he lay back beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched, and watched the leaves dance overhead. The contact was small, almost innocent, but it felt significant, like crossing another bridge, taking another step towards something neither of them could quite name yet, but both felt building between them. Elias, Sana said after a while. What happens next, after we rebuild the barn, after we weather whatever the townspeople say? What comes after that? I don't know. Keep working the ranch, get through winter, maybe expand the herd come spring. He turned his head to look at her. Why, you got somewhere else you need to be. No, I want to know what you expect from me. What happens when the debt is truly paid, when there is no more obligation between us? There's no obligation now. I told you that from the start. But there is. My father sent me to work off his debt, and I have been doing that. But debts do not last forever. Eventually, the account is settled, and then... She trailed off, uncertain. Elias understood what she was really asking. What happened when the reason she'd come here was fulfilled? Would he expect her to leave? Would he want her to stay? He sat up and looked down at her. Sana, I need you to hear this. Really hear it. You're not here because of some debt. Not anymore. Maybe that's how it started, but that's not what this is now. You're here because I want you here, because I like having you here, because when I think about you leaving, something in my chest gets tight and I can't quite breathe right. She opened her eyes and stared up at him. You want me to stay permanently, if you want to, and only if you want to. But yeah, I want you to stay. I want us to rebuild that barn together. I want to sit on the porch with you in the evenings and argue about whether the chickens need more feed. I want to teach you to read English better and have you teach me more Apache. He stopped, suddenly embarrassed by how much he was revealing. What do you want? She prompted softly. I want to stop being alone, and I want you to stop being alone. I want us to stop being alone together. Sana reached up and touched his face, her rough fingers gentle against his beard. I want that too, more than I thought I could want anything again. They kissed there in the canyon, with the water singing over stones and the cottonwoods whispering overhead. It was gentle, tentative, both of them half afraid of breaking something fragile. When they pulled apart, Sana was crying silent tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. "I thought I was broken," she whispered. "Thought that what happened to me had destroyed whatever part of me could feel this. But you make me feel whole again. You were never broken, just hurt. And hurt things heal, remember, heal with scars. Scars are proof you survived. Nothing wrong with that." They stayed in the canyon until the sun began its afternoon descent, then reluctantly packed up and headed back. The ride home felt different than the ride out, lighter somehow, despite the heavy work that waited for them. They'd crossed another threshold, acknowledged something that had been building since that first night in the rain. When they reached the ranch, the burned barn looked less like a disaster and more like an opportunity, a blank slate, a chance to build something new. "Tomorrow we go to town," Elias said, dismounting. "Get supplies, face the music. Together, together." That night after dinner, Sana didn't retreat to her room immediately. Instead, she stayed by the fire while Elias read from his book of Whitman. She listened with her eyes closed, and when he finished, she said, "Read that last part again, about the body electric." He read it again, his voice soft in the firelight, and when he looked up, Sana was watching him with an expression that made his breath catch. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. Everything. I am just grateful that my father found you, that you chose to save him, that all the terrible things that happened led me here to this moment." "Me too." She stood and crossed to him, then did something that surprised them both. She kissed the top of his head, a gesture so tender it brought a lump to his throat. "Good night, Elias. Good night, Sana." He listened to her door close and sat staring into the fire for a long time, thinking about the strange paths life took. How loss could lead to discovery, how endings could become beginnings, how two people with no reason to trust could find their way to something like hope. The next morning dawned clear and hot. They hitched the wagon dressed in their best clothes, which weren't much, but at least they were clean, and headed toward town. The journey took 2 hours, the wagon rattling over rough roads, while the sun climbed higher. Sweetwater wasn't much as towns went. One main street, maybe 20 buildings, and a population that swelled to a few hundred when the ranchers came in for supplies. But it was the closest thing to civilization for 50 miles, and it was where Elias did his business. As they rolled down the main street, Elias could feel eyes turning toward them, curtains twitching in windows, conversations stopping mid-sentence. By the time they pulled up in front of Hammond's general store, a small crowd had gathered, trying not to look like they were gawking, but failing miserably. "Remember," Elias murmured, "we're just here for supplies, in and out." "I am not afraid of their stares," Sana said, but her hand had moved to the knife at her belt. A tell Elias had learned meant she was more nervous than she wanted to admit. They climbed down from the wagon and headed for the store. The crowd parted slightly, people whispering behind their hands. Elias caught fragments Apache woman and living in sin and scandal. He ignored it all and pushed open the door. The bell above it chimed, announcing their arrival. Walter Hammond, the store owner, looked up from his ledger, and his expression went carefully neutral. "Elias, didn't expect to see you today. Need supplies, lumber nails, roofing tar, had a fire." "I heard." Hammond's eyes flicked to Sana, then away. "That's unfortunate." "Very. Can you fill the order?" Sure. It'll take some time to load. You want to wait or come back?" "We'll wait." Hammond nodded and disappeared into the back. Elias started looking through the store, picking out other items they'd need. Flour, coffee, sugar, ammunition. Sana stayed close, her eyes tracking everyone who entered. And people did enter, more than usual for a weekday morning. Word had spread fast. The rancher and his Apache woman had come to town. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, came in and gave them both a look that could have frozen water in July. 2 cowboys from the Bar T Ranch wandered in and stared openly until Elias stared back harder and they found somewhere else to be. Reverend Michaels entered, saw them, and left without buying anything. It was Deputy Marshal Carson who finally said something. He walked in with the kind of deliberate casualness that meant he was there on purpose, not by accident. He was young for a deputy, maybe 30, with a narrow face and suspicious eyes. He wore his badge like he was worried someone might try to take it. "Elias," he said by way of greeting. "Deputy, heard you had some trouble out your way. Some Apache warriors attacked your place." Word traveled fast, too fast. Someone must have seen the aftermath and ridden straight for town. "Had some visitors who didn't want to leave when asked," Elias said carefully. "We convinced them." Carson's eyes went to Sana. "That would be you, I'm guessing. You got a name, Sana." "Sana what?" "Just Sana." "She's working my ranch," Elias interjected, "helping me rebuild after the fire." "And these Apache warriors who attacked, they have something to do with her. They had something to do with not respecting a woman's right to choose her own path." Carson's expression suggested he had opinions about that, but was smart enough not to voice them. "There were bodies. 3 warriors, all shot dead. You killed them. Self-defense. They attacked my property, tried to burn me out. I defended what's mine. What's yours?" Carson looked at Sana again, and there was something ugly in that look. "That include her." Elias felt his temper rise, but before he could say something he'd regret. Sana stepped forward. "I am not property," she said, her voice cold and clear. "Not his, not the tribe's, not anyone's. I work his ranch because I choose to. I stay because I choose to. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me." Several people in the store had gone very quiet listening. Carson's face reddened. "Just trying to understand the situation, miss. No offense meant." "Much offense taken," Sana replied, "but I am used to it." Before things could escalate further, Walter Hammond returned with good news. "Got your order loaded. That'll be $43. Elias paid, trying to ignore the whispers that had started up around them. They loaded a few more items into the wagon, then climbed up to leave. As they did, a voice called out from the crowd. "Shame on you, Elias Holt." It was Mrs. Henderson standing on the boardwalk with her hands on her ample hips. "Your poor wife barely cold in the ground, and here you are cavorting with a savage." Elias pulled the wagon to a stop. He could have kept going, should have kept going, but something in him snapped. Maybe it was hearing Sarah invoked to judge him. Maybe it was the word savage applied to Sana. Maybe it was just 3 years of grief and loneliness finally finding an outlet. He climbed down from the wagon and walked over to Mrs. Henderson. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. The quiet fury and shame on his tone was enough. "My wife's name was Sarah. She was kind, generous, and believed in treating every person with dignity, regardless of where they came from or what they looked like. And if she were here right now, she'd be ashamed of you, Mrs. Henderson, ashamed of your cruelty masquerading as righteousness, ashamed of your judgment of things you don't understand." "Well, that's the problem. You never have understood, never tried to. You just sit in your nice house with your nice things and judge people for surviving the best way they know how." He turned to address the whole crowd now. "This woman standing in my wagon, her name is Sana. She works harder in a day than most of you work in a week. She's been through things that would break most people, and she's still standing, still trying, still choosing to be kind in a world that hasn't been kind to her. If you've got a problem with her being in my life, that says a lot more about you than it does about either of us." Silence. The kind of complete silence that follows a thunderclap. Then unexpectedly a voice spoke up from the back of the crowd. "Elias is right." It was Tom Wilson, owner of the neighboring spread. He pushed through the crowd, his weathered face set in determined lines. "Sarah was a good woman. Best woman I ever knew besides my own wife, and she wouldn't stand for this kind of gossip and hatred. She'd have invited Sana to Sunday dinner and made anyone who objected feel about 2 inches tall." He looked at the crowd. "Y'all should be ashamed. Man loses his wife, lives alone for 3 years. And when he finally finds some company, some help, some reason to keep going, you want to tear him down for it. That ain't Christian. That ain't neighborly. That's just mean. A few people had the grace to look embarrassed. Most just looked away. "Thank you, Tom," Elias said quietly. "Don't mention it. You need help rebuilding that barn, you let me know. I'll bring my boys over." "I'd appreciate that." Elias climbed back into the wagon. As they pulled away, he could feel Sana shaking beside him, not with fear, but with suppressed emotion. When they were clear of town, she finally spoke. "You did not have to do that." "Yeah, I did. They will hate you now for defending me." "Some of them already did. Rest will get over it or they won't. Either way, it doesn't change anything." She wiped her eyes roughly. "No one has ever stood up for me like that. Not once. Not ever." "Well, now someone has. Get used to it." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon creaking and swaying over the rough road. Finally, Sana said, "Tom Wilson, his wife. She was Sarah's friend, best friend. Margaret, they used to spend hours together talking about things I never understood and probably wasn't supposed to. And she has not come to visit you since Sarah died. No, I think it hurt too much. Seeing the ranch without Sarah in it, easier to stay away." "That is sad." "Yeah, but people grieve in their own ways. Can't fault her for that." When they reached the ranch, they unloaded the wagon in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The lumber was good quality, the nails were straight, and they had everything they needed to start rebuilding in the morning. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Sana said something that surprised him. "I think there is a child." Elias's heart stopped, just stopped dead in his chest for what felt like an entire minute. "What? A child growing inside me. I am late. I feel different. I think I am with child. But we haven't, we only just—" "Not yours, not yet, from before, from the canyon yesterday." She looked at him, her eyes uncertain. "I did not think I could anymore. After what happened after the damage, I thought that part of me was broken, but I feel it, I know it." Elias couldn't breathe. A child. Sana was carrying a child, his child, their child. "Are you sure?" he managed. "As sure as I can be without waiting longer to know for certain, but yes, I am sure." "And you? How do you feel about it?" She thought about this for a long moment. Terrified, grateful, worried, happy, all of it at once. "I did not plan this, did not expect it, but now that I know, now that I feel it, I want it, want this child, want this life." She took his hand. "If you want it too." "Want it, Sana, He stopped, overwhelmed. "When Sarah died, when we lost our son, I thought that was it. Thought I'd never have a family again, never have a reason to build anything beyond surviving. And now you're telling me that we will need another room," she finished softly, "for the child." Elias laughed, a sound somewhere between joy and disbelief. "Yeah, we'll need another room." He pulled her close, then wrapping his arms around her and holding on like she might disappear if he let go. She leaned into him, and they sat there as the stars wheeled overhead and the coyotes began their evening chorus. "We'll build it," Elias said into her hair. "Build the barn, build the room, build a life, all of it, together." "Together," she agreed. And sitting there on that porch, with the woman he was learning to love in his arms and the promise of a child on the way, Elias Holt felt something he hadn't felt in 3 long years. Hope. The work began the next morning with the sound of hammer against nail, wood against wood, and 2 people building something that had nothing to do with debt or obligation, and everything to do with choice. Elias measured and cut while Sana held boards steady, their movements synchronized in the way of people who'd learned to work as one unit rather than 2 separate beings. The heat was relentless the way it always was in late summer, but they worked through it, pausing only for water and the occasional rest in whatever shade they could find. By noon, the frame of the new barn was beginning to take shape, rising from the ashes of the old. like something determined to prove that destruction wasn't permanent, that things could be rebuilt better and stronger than before. Tom Wilson showed up around 2 o'clock with his 2 sons, both strapping young men in their early 20s who knew their way around lumber and hard work. He climbed down from his wagon and surveyed what they'd accomplished. "Making good progress," he said approvingly. "You two work well together." "We manage," Elias replied, wiping sweat from his face. "My Margaret wanted me to bring this." Tom handed over a basket covered with a cloth. "She's been baking all morning, said she was sorry for staying away so long and that Sarah would have liked Sana." Under the cloth were fresh biscuits, a jar of honey, and an apple pie that was still warm. Elias felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. "Tell her thank you. Tell her she's welcome to visit any time." "I will. Now where do you want us?" With 5 people working, the barn went up faster than Elias had dared hope. By sundown, they had the basic structure complete: walls, roof beams, everything that would keep it standing through wind and weather. The finish work would take more time, but the bones were there, solid and true. Tom and his sons left with promises to return if needed, and Elias and Sana ate Margaret's pie sitting on the porch steps, too tired to do much more than chew and swallow. The pie was perfect, sweet and tart, and exactly what they needed after a day of brutal labor. "Your friend's wife," Sana said, scraping up the last crumbs. "She is kind to send this, to send her husband." "Margaret's good people. So's Tom. There are more good folks than bad, I think. The bad ones are just louder." "Perhaps." Sana set down her plate and placed a hand on her stomach, a gesture Elias was learning meant she was thinking about the child. "When do we build the other room, the one for the baby?" "Soon as the barn is finished. Maybe next week. It won't take long, just need to extend the back wall, add another door, put in a window." He paused. "Unless you want it inside the main house, close to where we sleep." "Where we sleep," she repeated, and there was something in her tone, a question maybe, or a hope. "We have not talked about that, about where I will sleep, where you will sleep, where we will sleep." They'd been dancing around this since the canyon, since the kiss, since the revelation about the child. The spare room was still hers, his room was still his, and they'd been maintaining that separation even as everything else between them had shifted. "Where do you want to sleep?" Elias asked carefully. "With you, if you want that, if you are ready for that." She looked at him directly, her eyes clear and honest. "I know you still love her, your Sarah. I know part of your heart will always be hers. I do not ask you to forget her or stop loving her, but I think there is room for more than one kind of love, and I hope, that you might have room for me too." Elias reached over and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Sarah used to say that love isn't a pie. You don't divide it up into smaller and smaller pieces until there's nothing left. Love is like a candle, you can light 1,000 other candles from it, and the first flame doesn't get any smaller." She believed that, and I think she was right. "So you have room for me. I have room for you. Have had for a while now, if I'm being honest. Just wasn't sure if you were ready." "I am ready, scared but ready. I have been afraid of being touched, afraid of intimacy for so long, but with you it feels different, safe, like I am choosing it rather than having it taken from me. We'll go slow as you need, and if you ever change your mind, ever need space, you just say the word. No questions, no hurt feelings." She smiled, that soft smile that still felt like a gift every time he saw it. "You are a good man, Elias Holt, better than I thought men could be." That night she brought her few belongings into his room. Their room now, and they lay beside each other in the darkness, not touching at first, just sharing the space and the silence. Eventually Sana rolled over and tucked herself against his side, her head on his shoulder, and Elias wrapped his arm around her and held her close. "This is enough," she murmured. "Just this, being close. This is everything," he replied. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient, like they were creating something that had always existed, just waiting for them to discover it. They finished the barn, built the nursery as an addition to the main cabin, and started preparing for winter. They worked the land together, ate together, slept tangled in each other's arms, and slowly, carefully learned how to be partners in all the ways that mattered. Sana's pregnancy became more obvious as October turned to November. Her body changed, growing rounder in the middle, and with it came a kind of fierce protectiveness in Elias that he'd never experienced before. He found himself checking on her constantly. Was she eating enough, resting enough, warm enough? She tolerated his hovering with amused patience, occasionally reminding him that Apache women gave birth in the field and went back to work the same day. "That's not happening here," he'd reply stubbornly. "You're resting before, during, and after. I'll handle the work." "You will handle the work alone for how long? However long it takes." She'd shake her head at his foolishness, but wouldn't argue, and he knew she was secretly pleased by his concern. Nashota visited once in those months, appearing one morning like a ghost from another life. He looked older, more frail, and Elias wondered how much longer the old man would be able to make these journeys. They sat on the porch while Sana made coffee, and Nashota studied the rebuilt barn, the new addition to the house, the general air of industry and purpose that had replaced the earlier emptiness. "You have built something good here," he said finally. "We have," Elias corrected. "Sana's done as much as me, more maybe." "She looks happy. I have not seen her look happy in many years." "I hope she is. I'm trying to give her reasons to be." Nashota turned his dark eyes on Elias, and in them was a weight of knowledge and experience. "There is a child coming." It wasn't a question. Elias nodded. "Yes, spring, we think, April or May." "This is good. A child is hope, is future." He paused. "The tribe knows. Word has reached them. Some are angry. Some say she has betrayed us entirely by bearing a white man's child. But most are simply sad that she could not find happiness among her own people. She can still visit, can still maintain her connections. I'm not trying to cut her off from her heritage. I know you are not that kind of man, but she has chosen a different path, and some paths lead away from where you started. This is the nature of choice." Nashota sipped his coffee. "I am proud of her and grateful to you. You have given her what her own people could not: acceptance without judgment, love without conditions, a place where her wounds do not define her. She's given me the same thing. Then you are both fortunate." When Sana came out with more coffee, Nashota embraced her with the tenderness of a father who knows his time with his child is limited. He placed his hand on her swelling belly and spoke in Apache words Elias couldn't understand but felt the power of. A blessing maybe, or a prayer. When he was done, Sana was crying silently, and Nashota wasn't far behind. "Be well, daughter," he said. "Be happy. That is all I ever wanted for you. And you, father, take care of your leg. Rest more. I will rest when I am dead. Until then, there is too much living to do." He rode away, and this time when he disappeared into the distance, both Elias and Sana knew it might be the last time they saw him. He was old, his health was failing, and the journey was hard. But he'd come anyway to see his daughter one more time, to bless the child she carried, to make peace with the choices that had led her here. December brought cold that made the desert feel like a different planet. They spent more time indoors, Elias reading, while Sana worked on making clothes for the baby, tiny shirts and blankets, sewn from whatever fabric they could spare. Sometimes she'd sing while she sewed old Apache songs her mother had taught her, and Elias would close his eyes and just listen, thinking about how strange and wonderful it was that his cabin now held these sounds. On Christmas Eve, Margaret Wilson finally came to visit. She arrived with Tom in the early afternoon, bringing food and gifts, and an apology 20 minutes long for staying away so long. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she had the kind of presence that filled a room. Within minutes of arriving, she'd hugged both Elias and Sana, complimented the house, admired the nursery, and reduced Sana to tears with a baby quilt she'd made herself. Sarah would have made one just like this, Margaret said, her own eyes wet. She was always planning, always preparing for the baby. She'd have been the best mother. She would have, Elias agreed quietly. Margaret turned to Sana. And so will you, dear. I can tell. You've got that fierce look about you, the one that says you'll protect this child with everything you have. That's what makes a good mother. Not bloodline or tradition or what people expect. Just love and fierce determination. They shared Christmas dinner together, the four of them, and it felt like family in a way Elias hadn't experienced since Sarah died. There was laughter and stories and moments of comfortable silence. When Tom and Margaret left, they promised to return for the birth, to help however they could, and Elias knew they meant it. I like them, Sana said that night as they lay in bed. They remind me that not all people are cruel, that some keep their hearts open even when it would be easier to close them. They're the best kind of people, the kind that remember what matters. Winter deepened. January was brutal snow that actually stuck to the ground for days, winds that howled through every crack in the walls, temperatures that made the horses huddle together for warmth. But the cabin stayed warm, the food held out, and they had each other. On the worst days when going outside meant risking frostbite, they'd stay in bed late talking about everything and nothing, planning for the spring, imagining what their child would look like. I hope they have your eyes, Elias said one morning, tracing the curve of Sana's face. I hope they have your kindness, she replied. They'll have your strength. That's certain. Strongest person I know. Then they will be unstoppable. February brought a thaw, and with it, a visitor neither of them expected. Elias was chopping wood when he saw the rider approaching, a white man, well-dressed, riding an expensive horse. As he got closer, Elias recognized him as Charles Hammond Walter's younger brother and the town's only lawyer. Mr. Holt, Hammond said, dismounting. Might I have a word? Depends on what about. About ensuring the future of your family. They went inside where Sana was kneading bread. She looked up when they entered, her eyes immediately wary. Strange men meant trouble in her experience. It's all right, Elias assured her. This is Charles Hammond. He's a lawyer. Which usually means trouble, she said, but there was a hint of humor in it. Hammond smiled. Fair enough, but I come with good intentions. My brother told me about your situation, and I wanted to offer my services. What kind of services? Elias asked. Legal ones, marriage specifically. I'm also a justice of the peace. I can marry you right here, right now, if you'd like. And I can draw up papers, will land deed transfer, all the documents you'd need to protect each other and your child if something were to happen to one of you. Elias looked at Sana. They'd talked about marriage in abstract terms, but never seriously, never with a date or a plan. It had seemed like something that could wait, that didn't need to be formalized, because what they had was real, regardless of papers. But Hammond had a point. Without legal marriage, Sana had no claim to the ranch if something happened to Elias, and the child would be illegitimate in the eyes of the law, which could cause problems down the line. What do you think? He asked Sana. She looked uncertain. Marriage is not just paper. In my culture, it is ceremony, family, witnesses. In American culture, too, Hammond said gently. But the legal marriage and the ceremonial marriage don't have to be the same thing. You can do both. Have the legal ceremony now for protection. Have the ceremonial one later with family and tradition when the time is right. And if we do this legal marriage, what does it mean? Sana asked. It means you're legally his wife. You'd have claim to half of everything he owns. If he dies, you inherit. Your child would be legitimate with full legal rights. And it means anyone who wants to challenge your right to be here would have a much harder time. Sana was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she looked at Elias. Do you want this to be married to me legally? I want you protected. Want our child protected, want to make sure that if something happens to me, you're not left with nothing." He took her hands. "But more than that, yes. I want to be married to you, want to call you my wife, want everyone to know you're not just someone staying here, but someone who belongs here, who this place belongs to. Then yes, we will do this legal marriage." Hammond pulled out papers from his saddlebag and spent the next hour explaining everything, making sure they understood what they were signing. Then, with the winter sun streaming through the windows and no witnesses except the lawyer himself, Elias Holt and Sana stood in their cabin and spoke vows that bound them together in the eyes of the law. "I, Elias Holt, take you, Sana, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. I, Sana, take you, Elias Holt, to be my lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." Hammond pronounced them married, and they signed the papers that made it official. When Hammond left, he took with him documents that ensured Sana's legal right to the ranch and guaranteed their child's inheritance. It was practical, unromantic, and absolutely necessary. That night they had their own ceremony. Sana taught Elias the Apache words for husband and wife, for partnership and commitment. They stood outside under the stars and spoke promises in 2 languages, his English, her Apache, binding themselves together not just legally but spiritually. They shared bread and water, traditional symbols of sustenance and life. And when they went back inside, they did so as husband and wife in every sense that mattered. March brought warmth and the first signs of spring. The desert erupted in wildflowers, brittlebush and poppies and lupine, covering the hills in waves of yellow and orange and purple. Sana's belly was huge now, making even simple movement difficult. She moved slowly, one hand pressed to her lower back, the other on her stomach where the baby kicked and rolled. "I think they are practicing to be a horse," she said one afternoon, feeling a particularly strong kick. "Or maybe a mule, very stubborn. Takes after their mother then. Or their father." Elias had prepared everything he could think of. Clean linens, hot water ready to heat at a moment's notice, all of Margaret's instructions written down and memorized. They were as ready as they could be for something neither of them had any real experience with. The baby came on a warm April evening when the sky was painted in shades of rose and gold. Sana's water broke while they were eating dinner, and suddenly everything was motion and urgency, and her gripping his hand hard enough to bruise. Tom had ridden to fetch Margaret as soon as the contractions started, and the older woman arrived within an hour, calm and capable, and exactly what they needed. She took charge immediately, sending Elias to boil water and gather supplies, while she helped Sana into the bedroom. The labor lasted through the night and into the next morning. Elias paced the main room, listening to Sana's cries and feeling utterly helpless. This was the part he couldn't help with, couldn't fix, couldn't control. All he could do was wait and pray and hope that both mother and child would survive what women had been surviving since the beginning of time. Just after dawn, when the birds were starting their morning songs, he heard a different sound, thin, reedy, unmistakably the cry of a newborn. His heart leapt into his throat, and he moved toward the bedroom, but Margaret appeared in the doorway, blocking his path. "Mother and baby are both fine," she said, smiling. "Give me 5 more minutes to clean them up, and then you can meet your daughter." A daughter. They had a daughter. When Margaret finally let him in, he found Sana propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in the quilt Margaret had made. She looked up as he entered, and her smile was radiant. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Elias crossed the room on shaking legs and sat on the edge of the bed. Sana pulled back the blanket, revealing a tiny face. Eyes closed, skin golden brown, a shock of dark hair. She was perfect, absolutely impossibly perfect. "She is beautiful," Elias whispered, afraid to speak louder and wake her. "She has your nose," Sana observed. "And my mouth, I think," We will have to wait to see whose eyes. Have you thought of a name? I was thinking Sarah for your wife, and Nasha, which means owl in Apache, a symbol of wisdom and protection. Sarah Nasha Holt. Elias felt tears prick his eyes. Sarah would have loved that, would have loved her. I hope so, because I think she helped bring this baby into the world. I felt her with me during the labor, felt someone giving me strength when I thought I had none left. Maybe she was. Maybe she wanted to make sure we were all right. They sat together on that bed, the three of them, mother, father, and daughter, as the morning sun filled the room with golden light. Outside, the desert was blooming, the land renewing itself the way it did every spring. Inside, two people who'd been broken and cast aside and left for dead had created something new. Something that proved survival wasn't just about enduring, but about continuing, about building, about choosing hope even when hope seemed foolish. Margaret and Tom stayed for a week, helping with the endless work that came with a newborn, the feeding and changing and soothing and worrying. When they finally left, they did so with promises to visit often, to help however they could to be the family that Elias and Sana had chosen, if not been born into. The summer passed in a blur of sleepless nights and quiet joy. Sarah Nasha grew steadily, her tiny features becoming more defined, her personality emerging. She was calm like her father, observant like her mother, and absolutely determined when she wanted something. By 6 months, she was babbling in what sounded like a mixture of English and Apache, which made Sana laugh until she cried. She does not know she is supposed to choose one language or the other, Sana said. She just speaks from her heart. Best way to communicate, Elias replied. One evening in October, exactly a year after Sana had told him about the pregnancy, they sat on the porch watching the sunset while Sarah slept in her cradle nearby. The ranch had prospered, the cattle were healthy, the land was productive, and they'd even expanded slightly, buying an adjacent parcel from a rancher who was heading back east. Do you remember what I said that first day? Sana asked. When I told you about the baby, you said we'd need another room, and you said we'd build it, build everything together. We did. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. I thought I was dead inside, thought that what happened to me had killed everything good and soft and capable of love. But you showed me I was wrong. You showed me that wounded things can heal, that broken people can build whole lives, that love is not about being perfect or undamaged. It is about being seen, truly seen, and chosen anyway. Elias wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. You did the same for me. I was so busy surviving, I'd forgotten how to live. You reminded me, gave me a reason to build instead of just maintaining, to hope instead of just enduring. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in colors that had no names, while their daughter slept and the desert prepared for night, and the land they'd built together stretched out around them in every direction. This ranch used to be where I buried my past, Elias said, softly echoing words he'd spoken months ago. But you were right. Now it's where our future begins, where Sarah will grow up, where we'll grow old together, where two people who had every reason to give up chose to keep going instead. Because it is the place I chose to stay. Sana finished completing the thought they'd shared before. Why did you stay, really? It wasn't just about the debt or even about falling in love. There was something else. She thought about this for a long moment. Because for the first time in my life, someone looked at me, all of me, with all my wounds and scars and broken pieces, and said, you are enough. Not, you will be enough when you heal, or you were enough before you were damaged. Just, you are enough exactly as you are. And once I knew that, once I believed it, I could not leave. Because belonging is not about being perfect, it is about being accepted. And I finally belonged with someone. With me. With you. Sarah stirred in her sleep, making the small sounds that meant she'd wake soon and want feeding. But for now, for this moment, she slept peacefully while her parents held each other and watched the day fade into night. Two survivors who'd found in each other not salvation because people can't save other people, but partnership. The kind of partnership that said we're both wounded, we're both healing, and we're doing it together. Love wasn't ownership. It wasn't debt or obligation or tradition or what other people expected. Love was the freedom to stay, the choice to build, the courage to heal, and the wisdom to know that broken things, when mended with care and patience and faith, could become stronger than they'd ever been before. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky and the desert cooled around them, Elias Holt and his wife Sana sat on their porch with their daughter sleeping nearby, living proof that endings could become beginnings, that loss could lead to discovery, and that two people with every reason to remain broken could choose instead to become whole, not by erasing their scars, but by building a life strong enough to hold them.